I would. Hi, everybody. My name is Jenny Masters. I'm so happy to be joining you. So we have kind of like a structured presentation, but please feel free to interject with questions at any point throughout the presentation. Don't feel like you can't interrupt, okay? So let me just share my screen here.
Just a quick note, I am going to mute everyone so there's not any background noise, but if you have a question or something, feel free to unmute yourself.
All right, guys. So this presentation just kind of overviews what an acoustic neuroma is, what the common symptoms are, and then kind of what our technology is right now that we have available to you guys, and different apps we'll be discussing and whatnot. But bring up anything along the way if it sparks a question. So first I want to start off, I'm sure you are all well versed in this, but what is an acoustic neuroma? This is also known as a vestibular schwannoma, and it's a non-cancerous, usually slow-growing tumor that develops on the main auditory and vestibular nerve, or the 8th cranial nerve, which is the nerve that leads from your inner ear up to your brain. And then this can vary in size, shape, and location for each person. The symptoms of an acoustic neuroma really vary depending on the size and location of the neuroma, which reveals different emerging symptoms, including tinnitus, hearing loss, imbalance, facial numbness, tingling, weakness, clumsiness, or taste alteration. So why can it cause these symptoms and why do they vary? It depends on where it's located in relation to your nerves. So I'm not sure if you can see my mouse here, but here we have the facial nerve and the acoustic or the auditory nerve, and then the two portions of our vestibular nerve, and they're fairly close together. And then on this image here, we have the addition of a possible placement of an acoustic neuroma. So depending on where that neuroma is placed and what nerve or nerves it's putting pressure on will change the symptoms that someone experiences. So for example, here, the neuroma is putting pressure on the auditory nerve, which can result in things like hearing loss and tinnitus. It's also putting pressure on part of the vestibular nerve, which can cause imbalance and dizziness, but it really varies depending on where that's placed. So what are the treatment options for an acoustic neuroma? There are multiple paths that an individual can take, including the observation of the neuroma and the symptoms, surgical interventions, and then management of those symptoms and side effects, which is the part that we as audiologists can help with, specifically hearing loss, tinnitus, and dizziness that one might experience. So as for hearing loss, there are many different routes to take. Amplification options include your traditional hearing aids, what's called a CROS system, an Osseointegrated device, or personal sound amplification products, which we'll go throughout the slides. And then there are also helpful communication strategies that an individual can utilize regardless of what treatment option you take. So here we have examples of a traditional hearing aid option. There are many different styles and manufacturers, and your audiologist would help you navigate which option is best for you and your hearing loss and your lifestyle needs. We have this option here, which we have a piece of the hearing aid that sits behind the ear and then the portion that goes inside the ear. We also have options for small custom fit devices, such as this one up here, or these at the bottom of the screen. This varies from fitting entirely in your ear canal to filling up the outside of the ear. So how exactly does that hearing aid work? Here we have the example of the behind the ear style. So this black piece sits on the top back portion of your ear. And here we have multiple microphones that survey the environment and pick up different sounds and speech. And then there's this wire that runs down flush to your skin on the side of the ear. And at the end, there's a speaker, which then outputs the amplified sound from the hearing aid, and it's covered either with a disposable little earbud or a custom ear mold, depending on what you and your audiologist decide. And then depending on the hearing aid that's chosen, the buttons on the back vary, but they can help with volume control or changing in different programs that you and your audiologist have put in the hearing aid. We also have what is called a CROS or a BICROS system. Sometimes an acoustic neuroma can cause significant hearing loss where that ear is not usable or cause distortion to the point where speech isn't really intelligible in that ear. So for that case, here we have the poor ear, the ear with the acoustic neuroma, where a device would sit on it. So you'd have two of those hearing aids. The one on the poorer ear is just a microphone, and that picks up sound and sends it over to the one on the better hearing ear, which can have hearing loss or normal hearing. And that sound is then played to that ear. We also have Osseointegrated devices as an option. Sorry about that. This works by stimulating the good ear through bone conduction. So a device is placed on your poorer hearing ear where sound is picked up, and then it vibrates the skull, which then sends the sounds to your better hearing cochlea. This can be done with a surgical abutment, which is shown right here, where kind of screw is placed behind the ear, and then the external device snaps onto that. Another surgical option is placing the device completely under the skin, and then the external piece connects through a magnet. And then there are some non-surgical options for this as well, including a headband or a sticker where the device snaps onto. Another option for hearing and sometimes tinnitus is a cochlear implant. This is a surgical option with the use of an external device as well. And so an electrode, as seen here, is placed into the cochlea, which is connected to this internal processor that sits under the skin, like here. And then the external device kind of looks like a hearing aid. It's a little bigger, sits on the outer ear, and an extra piece connects to the internal device through a magnet. This external device is what picks up the sounds in the environment, and it stimulates the nerves through the cochlea through electrical stimulation. This is the only option that provides direct stimulation to that poor hearing ear. Cochlear implants have previously not been FDA approved for single-sided deafness. So sometimes this has created barriers for patients, specifically with authorization from insurance. But one of the companies, Payal, has recently been approved for single-sided deafness, which is great news because it kind of breaks down some of those barriers individuals might experience. In line with cochlear implants, there's what's called a hybrid cochlear implant. So this is for individuals who still have good low pitch hearing. So as we know, hearing loss can vary with acoustic neuromas. And if somebody has some good low pitch hearing, an electrode is placed into the cochlea for those higher pitches and provides electrical stimulation. And then an additional piece is added on to this external device, which makes it turn into a hearing aid for those lower pitches. This can help maintain a more natural sound quality and provide you with some of those binaural cues that you can get with the leftover natural hearing, which can help with localization and hearing and noise. As you may know, with an acoustic neuroma, follow-up imaging is likely needed. And since there is a magnet placed under the skin with a cochlear implant and a magnet or an abutment with those osseointegrated devices, there are certain things that we need to consider with an MRI. The magnets and abutments can sometimes obscure the imaging on the MRI and block out a part that your physician might need to look at and take into account with your monitoring of the acoustic neuroma. But cochlear implant and osseointegrated device manufacturers have designed devices with MRI compatible magnets or the option for having the magnet easily removed surgically prior to the MRI. And so I've laid out a table here kind of going over the different manufacturers and what they are or aren't compatible with, but most of them are compatible with at least some form of an MRI. Just something to consider though. Some helpful communication tips. I think that no matter what route that you decide to take, it's always beneficial to have these kind of in your back pocket, your toolbox. I think it's important to feel confident in the ability to advocate to yourself, for yourself and your listening needs, and to feel comfortable telling your communication partner about your hearing loss and those needs. So here are just a couple of helpful tips, but I think most importantly is making sure somebody gets your attention before they talk to you, making sure that you guys are facing each other and not talking from a different room, and making sure that the other person is speaking slowly and clearly. So I think being able to advocate and tell that person your needs really helps. So I just want to review things that hearing aids can sometimes help with. They can improve audibility and access to sounds and speech in your environment. They provide appropriate amplification to specific frequencies as needed based on your hearing loss. They're also set to ensure that while soft sounds are audible, loud sounds don't get too loud and uncomfortable. And they can help in different listening environments, including cars or outdoors or classrooms or music, and occasionally some noisy situations. So they have some capabilities of decreasing that background noise or minimizing some occlusion or the feeling of being plugged up if you have that ear mold or earbud in your ear with different programming changes. They can help with localization if it's a traditional hearing aid, and they can be cosmetically appealing. So our current technology, hearing aid technology advances day by day. So we're forever learning and forever growing. They're very intelligent, self-adaptive hearing aids now that survey your environment and kind of make these automatic adjustments to help improve and focus on the speech of interest and reduce that noise. And they do this through noise reduction and what's called directional microphones so that they can focus in on the sound of interest. Microphones are becoming more adaptive and able to focus on speech both in front of you and say to the side of you if you're listening to somebody in a car while you're driving. Almost all hearing aids can now pair to phones and stream audio from phones and other electronics and have wireless connectivity capabilities. So they're just growing every day with new advancements. What people don't like about hearing aids, there are some things that
yeah.
Would
you expand on the adaptive directional capabilities?
Yeah.
One of the things I find with hearing aids, everything comes in one ear. So everything's on my right. How does
Okay.
adaptive directional capability work?
Yeah, so hearing aids, as we've progressed through technology, they have multiple microphones on each hearing aid. And so depending on your hearing aid and the level of technology, they can become more automatic. So they can change which microphone is listening to the speaker of interest to kind of zone in on that and tone down everything else around you. Does that help answer your question, Mike? You're muted, Mike.
I have a phonic BICROS.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
does that, where they will have microphones in both sides?
So the BICROS system is what I was discussing earlier. So you have, is your right side your poorer ear or your better ear?
Well, I have the one that wirelessly transmits over to the good ear, and then
Yeah.
it mixes with the good ear input, and everything comes in the one ear.
Yeah, so that is, in that case, that adaptive technology is not necessarily applied. So with the BICROS system, we aren't using that other ear. So everything is filtered into that right ear. So unfortunately, the BICROS system does not help with localization abilities.
Mhm. Like with a BICROS, you still have a hearing aid in your better ear. That hearing aid can utilize the function of different microphones, but when you're transmitting sound from one ear to the other ear, any directionality features are not applicable because we're really transmitting everything over to your better ear. So there are definitely limitations with localization and what certain technology that's available can do in certain situations. There are some situations where people with BICROS will not use the transmitter and just use the one side, which is the hearing aid side, to help with certain specific situations. And we can share more examples if we have time at the end. Great.
All right. So some things that people don't like about hearing aids are their ability to understand speech and noise. While hearing aids do have some capability to reduce noise in the environment, they're not perfect, though we wish they were. Hearing your own voice is a complaint of some individuals, depending on what kind of hearing aid they're fit with. There are some programming adjustments that we can make, but sometimes it doesn't improve it completely. Visibility and cosmetics can sometimes turn people away, as well as ease of use, the ease of using a telephone, comfort and cost of the devices. These each vary from person to person and can be addressed on an individual basis, though. So here's a quick overview of different treatment options for hearing loss with an acoustic neuroma, with some pros and cons to each. So as we were just talking about with Mike, the CROS hearing aid, this is non-surgical. It can reduce the head shadow or the need to turn towards the speaker if they're on your bad ear. It can improve speech understanding and noise if speech is on the poor ear and noise is on the good ear. But this does require two devices and it does not improve localization. The Osseointegrated devices, this is one device. It can also reduce the head shadow and improve speech and noise if speech is on the poorer ear. But it also does not improve localization. And in some cases, it does require surgery, although there are those non-surgical options. And then a cochlear implant, this is also one device, though it is a bigger device. This is the only device that actually provides direct stimulation to the cochlea in the poorer ear, which can help with tinnitus, and it can restore some binaural cues, which can help with localization. However, this does require surgery. And then speech understanding with this device varies from person to person. And then also candidacy for this device depends on the size, location, and treatment option of your acoustic neuroma. But I think it's very important to remember that no matter which option you choose, all of them can help in some ways reduce your listening effort, which can sometimes cause a lot of fatigue throughout the day. All right, Chris.
Okay, and so since we had mentioned earlier that with cochlear implants, it's just in the past couple of years, there's been FDA approval for a single-sided hearing loss. There's been some cool advancements recently in terms of cochlear implants we wanted to share with all of you. So there's an ongoing study right now that's particularly looking at cochlear implants for patients with acoustic neuromas. And it's from one of the cochlear implant manufacturers, the same manufacturer that made that implant for single-sided hearing loss, MED-EL. They have a new ongoing trial that's going right now called the MED-EL Auditory Nerve Test System. And it began back in January of last year. And here's an article. It's at MED-EL has a partnership with Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis. And what they're doing is while they do an acoustic neuroma surgery, they place a device called an auditory nerve test system in the cochlea. So then they're able to monitor the health of the nerve during the surgery. And then if everything's looking appropriate for implantation in that same surgery, they're able to insert the MED-EL cochlear implant and complete all of that in one surgery, having a good sense of the health of the auditory nerve as they resect the tumor, and then also placing the cochlear implant in the same surgery. So this study is ongoing. It's going to be set to complete according to the clinical trial website coming up on January 30th of this year. So it'll be cool to see. Right now they have 5 participants who they're working with, and they're doing some other other measures afterwards to try and get a better sense of how are their localization abilities, what was the success in their speech understanding abilities, and it'll be, I think, sort of a cool first big step in looking at this particular case of cochlear implants and the benefit for acoustic neuroma patients. And so, as we mentioned before, with all these different, whether it be the CROS system, whether it be an Osseointegrated device or a cochlear implant, sometimes these different devices aren't enough, and it's really important for whether what device you choose, if you decide to choose a device, that we are still working with, a system that will have difficulty, particularly in speech and noise. That's one of the things we hear most often from patients is, that fine tuning, that the real extra clarity of speech. Even with the best hearing aid out there, the best hearing option, there is still going to be limitations. So it's important to know about some other extra things that everybody can do to try and improve their overall listening and speech understanding abilities. And so in particular, going to be focusing on some assistive listening devices, and we'll bring up some apps in a little bit here. I know a few people had mentioned they're interested in learning about some different apps or resources, and even some that some different options for people. If cost is a barrier, some cool options that are coming down the pipeline right now for different treatment options for individuals with hearing loss. And so with all of these different assistive listening devices, one of the main goals is improving that signal to noise ratio. So we have our speech, we have our background noise, and we really want to try and boost that speech because we know that the outcomes will be better, speech understanding will be better. It's been proven in lots of studies. The louder we can make that speech, the easier it'll be for people to improve their hearing in noisy environments. And so a lot of these different devices, that's really the end goal is trying to boost speech more and bring down that background noise as much as we can to try and improve your understanding ability in your day-to-day life, and particularly when you get in those more difficult environments where there's background noise. So here's some of the devices that we recommend to our patients with different types of hearing loss, particularly individuals with single-sided hearing loss who need some extra resources because we see a difference between the two ears. Some of those our ears are used to having, information from both sides to try and compare for noise. So here's some extra resources that we recommend. One of a really great system is FM systems or remote microphone systems. By placing an external microphone and then having that connect to your hearing device, it can help improve that signal to noise ratio. So improve that speech and try and reduce that background noise. And that's been a really proven way for patients who do want to take that next step. We really highly recommend FM systems or remote microphone systems. There's also other devices like telecoils, infrared systems, different telephone devices. So there's some resources of different phones that will caption out the phone calls, and just being an extra device to help be an extra cue. You'll have the auditory input of the sound you're hearing while someone's talking, and also by having those captions on the phone calls, that can be really helpful for individuals with hearing loss. Different alarm clocks that use lights, or smoke alarms that also use lights, recommend that for patients. Doorbell alerts that have lights are able to ping your phone, let you know, just an extra cue. We'll go on to the next slide. So here is a really great resource, telecoil, and this is something that you can get in a lot of different hearing devices for no extra cost. So always recommend, if you're working with an audiologist, make sure telecoil is something you bring up, because it's something that has to be selected in the beginning when you first get the device, and then that's a feature that you can access in the future. And so whenever you see this symbol here in the bottom right that says a hearing loop is installed, it's in a lot of different public places, auditoriums, theaters, different places of worship. And what it does is has an electromagnetic loop around the room, and it's able to pick up, send information from the microphone or the main person talking, and then through that loop, send it right to your hearing aid. So try and, again, boost that speech and reduce any background noise. And that's a really great sort of resource that that individuals can get added to their hearing device, as long as it's sort of selected in the beginning, and then that feature is enabled by your audiologist. And there's some other assistive listening devices as well. The Pocket Talker is a really great device. It's something we use around the hospital, even for patients who don't have a hearing aid yet, and just to improve our communication while we're talking to them about the results or counseling them. It's a really great cost-effective device, and I recommend it even to people who aren't ready for a hearing aid yet, and just around the house, if either for themselves or a different family member who needs to hear better in certain situations. It's simply a set of headphones and a little microphone where the volume can be controlled, and it sort of just boosts all of that volume. It costs around $100, can be purchased even online or on Amazon, and a really great tool for anybody who just needs extra boosted sound, and especially if cost may be something that's sort of limiting somebody from pursuing a hearing device. Definitely highly recommend a Pocket Talker. And as we mentioned before, different infrared systems, telecoils, smoke alarms with different lights, and then with those FM systems, that's another thing I wanted to bring up. Different hearing aids have the capability now to have it all sort of within the body of the hearing aid to connect to different remote microphone systems. So it used to be in this bottom right picture, you'll see a little boot that's sort of attached to the hearing aid, and some hearing aids still do have that today. But there's other devices now that have come out recently that actually have all of that same information sort of integrated into the hearing aid. So you're able to connect to other accessories or remote microphones and send that audio right from somebody else directly into your hearing aids wirelessly. So where this is most useful is, say, if we could go back to restaurants, particularly in noisy restaurants, some of them come as a little clip that somebody else can wear and be able to send. So your partner could be sitting across the table from you wearing that microphone, and by having the microphone closer to their mouth, it helps reduce a lot of that background noise and send a more direct, louder signal directly to both to your hearing aid or hearing device. There's also personal sound amplification products. So over here on the left is a version of one of those Pocket Talkers. And what these are is how it sort of differs from a hearing aid. Hearing aids are customizable and programmable by your audiologist, so they'll allow different amounts of volume for different pitches. What these devices do is they more just sort of boost up all of the volume. So like that Pocket Talker, or like some of these other devices that you can find online, they're just going to help improve the volume overall. And so they're a good cost-effective resource for anybody who may not be ready for a hearing aid or hearing device yet. A lot of these devices can be found online, and they don't require an audiologist. They can just be found online and are about in the range of about $100 to a couple $100 overall, and can provide a good extra boost of volume. Another exciting point that's going to be coming up in the next couple of years is over-the-counter hearing aids. And so right now, as I mentioned, you can get personal sound amplification products, or PSAPs, online, but a lot of those devices only turn up the volume overall, so they're not customizable like the hearing aids that you would get with an audiologist. However, it was passed back in 2018, and it's set to go into effect sometime in the next coming year to 2 years. And it's going to be over-the-counter hearing aids. And so Congress actually passed a law that would instate that the FDA is going to start to regulate these over-the-counter devices. And they're going to be for individuals with a mild to moderate hearing loss. And they have to be for adults over the age of 18. But what they'll allow is for somebody to go and have that access to a hearing device without the need of visiting, say, an audiologist or a hearing health professional first. And so I think this will be really useful for just breaking sort of that barrier to entry for individuals with hearing loss, and hopefully bringing down the price of hearing aids in general to make it more accessible for individuals with hearing loss. So this will be, I think, a really exciting thing to see. And I think we're going to see a lot more hearing devices coming out to consumers and to the market in the coming years. Just sort of anecdotally, I've seen in Australia one particular device that's really cool, that it's called New Hear, and it's something that has been allowed there, and I have a feeling it's going to be one of the first over-the-counter devices here in the US. But it's really cool because it actually using an app on your phone and having the devices in your ear, you're able to take sort of a little hearing screening test on your phone. And then after that, based off that, it'll sort of set the device where it thinks if you're in that mild to moderate hearing range, and then have some extra features for background noise adjustment. And if you're at a restaurant, I'll have a special restaurant program. So a lot of the features that hearing aids have are going to be a lot more accessible in the next coming years. And this device, I believe, is around $250. So quite affordable and a good option for people who may not be ready to pursue hearing devices. But one thing I do want to recommend is these over-the-counter devices are really for people in that more mild to moderate range. So for individuals who may have more hearing loss than that, I really do still recommend an audiologist, because I think that when there is a greater degree of hearing loss, it's really important to make sure we're not giving too much volume and damaging the hearing further, and trying to do our best to give the most appropriate amount of volume where it's needed the most based off hearing loss. But I definitely think this will be an exciting area of growth in the coming year, and something really to look out for is over-the-counter devices once the laws are fully in place and as that comes out to consumers in the next couple of years. So here's a couple different devices that we recommend to patients, even who want to do a hearing screening, and just at home, of some cool different resources where different people can sort of use a set of headphones and then check your hearing or even different speech understanding abilities. So one over here on the left is called UHear. It's from a manufacturer called Unitron. All these different apps are free, but it has just a way to sort of monitor hearing. And again, this test is just sort of a quick little screener that goes across different pitches, similar to what a hearing test you do with an audiologist. Of course, this is just through some different headphones that you'd have at home. But it is just a good way, if you're going to be using the same headphones every time, to sort of monitor your hearing in between the different hearing tests that you'd see with an audiologist. Another one here in the middle is from Siemens Hearing. This one uses nonsense syllables to assess your understanding abilities. So as you can see down at the bottom, it'll have sounds like ba or ah, and you would have to select the one from the list, and it helps trying to assess speech understanding abilities with these syllables that don't really make sense. And then another good screener over to the right, Sound Check from Starkey Labs, also allows across different pitches. There are some of the main pitches that we would test in the sound booth as well. Has a screener that you can use as well to assess your hearing.
Chris, can I add a comment here?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think these screening tests have a place in how they can be used for, but they also have limitations. And when I'm thinking about our group here today, I think one of the challenges with these screening tests is that we can't really, if there is a difference between the 2 years, when we test, we have to ensure that we're preventing the good ear from participating when we're testing the ear that has a greater degree of hearing loss. And so those kind of nuances or fineness to testing is not really possible with screeners. So they generally work okay as a means of monitoring when you mostly have a symmetrical hearing loss, but are not always accurate for when there are differences in hearing between the ears. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, and some other cool apps to recommend. These are some different ones, kind of like the Pocket Talker, where if you have an iPhone or an Android phone, these are some different resources that are gonna be able to, once again, with that idea of boosting the speech and trying to bring back down that background noise or volume. These are 3 different apps here, one called iHearing Aid, another eHear, and then Louder TV. And all of these having that goal of using the little microphone on your iPhone to try and pick up sound and boost speech. So the idea is that if you're wearing some Bluetooth headphones, you could have somebody else, if you're say in a noisy restaurant, have them put the phone with the microphone closer to their mouth and then send that sound right to your ears. So acting basically the same idea of when you're sending that sound from a remote microphone to your hearing aids, using your phone and some Bluetooth headphones you have, with that same idea of technology. And that could be used, with a listening partner you're speaking with, and then also even for television or other sounds that you may be wanting to hear. And then also want to talk about tinnitus. Tinnitus is something that we see a lot in our clinic. A lot of millions of people have tinnitus, and particularly for people with acoustic neuromas, it can sometimes be very, very bothersome because not only is there hearing loss, but sometimes even that tinnitus can be more bothersome, this constant ringing, buzzing sound that they're hearing. So I want to talk about some different management strategies for tinnitus. So what is tinnitus? It's a perception of sound in the absence of an external noise. So it's often described as a ringing or buzzing sound, sometimes a whooshing sound. And one of the main theories about what tinnitus is thought about is that, when there's normal hearing, there's always auditory input going from the ear up to the brain. But then if there's been some damage along that pathway, and something like hearing loss, where something is sort of inhibiting that flow of sound going up to the brain starts to sort of make up for those sounds that it's missing. So it starts to have this actually precept in the brain, or a sound that you start to hear and perceive as this tinnitus or buzzing or ringing sound. But one of the things interesting about tinnitus is that the more you focus on it, the louder it gets. And then as you focus on it, it sort of causes a little bit more stress, and it often, can sort of cause this fight or flight system in your body, and then the tinnitus gets louder. And then the more you focus on it, the louder it gets. So it's just this positive feedback loop that keeps going and going, and it can be really, really, really quite bothersome. And so a lot of our management strategies that we use are trying to sort of break that loop, because you know, when it comes to tinnitus and its impact on daily life, it can often cause sleep interference, trouble concentrating. We hear from a lot of patients, you know, issues of anxiety, social isolation. Sometimes the tinnitus can be so bothersome that it can lead to depression and, you know, inability to work and really live your day-to-day life. So really important issue that we try and find different ways to manage the tinnitus. And so when it comes to treatment for tinnitus, you know, unfortunately, there isn't any medication that can completely cause the tinnitus to go away. So one of the most frequent questions we get, you know, is there just a medication that we can take that'll just make the tinnitus go completely away? Unfortunately, there isn't, but there is a lot of different resources and ways that it can be managed. So I think it's really important that people with tinnitus understand that although there isn't a medication that'll magically make it go away, there is different ways that you can manage it. So it doesn't have that positive loop of just going and becoming so bothersome in your life. It's really about the different strategies that we recommend are about breaking that loop to try and make the tinnitus less bothersome. And what I like to think about is sort of like the shoes and the socks on your feet. You know, the socks are on your feet all day long, but you're probably not thinking about it. But then once you start thinking about it, you know, you start to notice, oh, my socks are in my feet. Is there a rock in my shoe? And then you just keep on focusing on that. And it's this, just like in the day-to-day life, how you don't usually focus on the socks on your feet. It's a similar idea with tinnitus, finding different ways to sort of break that loop and not see it so much as a threat and try and find different ways not to make it go completely away, because unfortunately it'll still be there, but find different ways to manage or cope so it doesn't become such a bothersome thing in your day-to-day life. So different ways, one of the main ways we recommend is sound therapy. And this is one way that you can help sort of reduce that sensation of ringing or tinnitus. And this is using an external stimulus or a masker to alter the perception and in the end, your reaction to tinnitus. So as I mentioned, it doesn't completely cure the condition, but it helps reduce that perception and those negative reactions that are associated with it, with the goal in the end of being habituation. So with this masker, we don't just want to completely blast out the tinnitus, completely cover it up. Really want to find the point where, you know, we're just barely covering up that tinnitus, and it's something you can be aware of, but it doesn't become so bothersome in your day-to-day life. So one of the first things we recommend, people most often notice tinnitus at nighttime, right before they're going to bed, particularly when it's in a quiet room where there's nothing else for your brain to focus on. So it starts focusing on that tinnitus. It gets louder and louder. And so in this process of using a little masker, we recommend, you know, a white noise machine, a fan, playing something in the background to keep your brain busy instead of focus so much on that tinnitus. Other sounds to help manage that volume. And in this process of habituation, overall, it's about retraining our brain to no longer perceive that tinnitus as a threat. So it's a sort of with that idea of the socks on your feet, you know, no longer, although that is information going up to our brain, you know, our ears never really get to turn off all night. They're just going and going, hearing sound. So finding different ways to reclassify that noise as unimportant, as unbothersome to you. And so some examples of other things that we have, you know, sort of habituated to is an air conditioner noise. You may have that going on in the back of your house, or a heater noise. And at first it may be or a refrigerator noise, may be really noticeable, but over time, your brain no longer sees it as a threat. And so it sort of goes off into the background. And that's the goal with tinnitus is, you know, no longer seeing that as a threat. So you're not attending to it as much. So it can help sort of, it's still there, but no longer focusing on as much and sort of making that mental switch. So there's some different applications we recommend for patients with tinnitus, and these are some different application examples here. Because tinnitus is something we often see so often with hearing loss, a lot of the major hearing aid manufacturers have produced some good resources, and a lot of these, it allows you to stream from your phone, different free applications, to either a set of headphones, if you have Bluetooth headphones, regular headphones, or your hearing aids and hearing devices, you can stream different sounds. So here's some different examples. Here on the top is one from a manufacturer called Oticon. And you can see it's called My Soundscape. They have different sounds that you can find, sort of a very low level, non-bothersome sound. Again, not so loud that it's sort of blasting out your ears, but just at a very low level. Some people like the sounds of, you know, bubbles in the background, nature sounds, a brook. So these are some different good resources we recommend for patients to try. And again, that idea of not going so loud you're masking out the tinnitus, but kind of finding that nice level where it keeps your brain busy listening to something else on a very soft background noise. So here's a couple of the different links in some of those main apps. These are from some different hearing aid manufacturers. So one being Oticon has a good app called Tinnitus Sound. Phonak is another hearing aid manufacturer. They have a application called Tinnitus Balance. Also, Starkey Relax has a lot of good resources in them. And then another hearing aid manufacturer called Resound has a tinnitus app we recommend called Resound Relief. So lastly, I want to talk about dizziness and imbalance. As audiologists, we work not only on the hearing side of things, but also in the inner ear. If you could see those little loops right next to that snail-shaped structure, all those loops are the part of our inner ear that gives us our information about our balance. And balance is a complex topic because it involves not only our inner ear, but also our sense of touch, our vision, and then how the brain sort of puts all that information and integrates all that information together. But the inner ear is really cool because those little loop structures have fluid in them, and they're sort of like gravity detectors. So as you move your head from side to side, all of that information is sending on that nerve, the vestibular nerve, right up to the brain. And so with patients who have an acoustic neuroma, sometimes not only does it impact hearing, but also your vestibular, your balance system, because those nerves are running right next to each other. So as audiologists, we play a role in helping to identify, you know, is there anything going on? Is there any impairment or loss of balance related specifically to the inner ear? And so what the inner ear really focuses on is, as I mentioned, sort of all that angular motion, or how when you're moving your head from side to side, keeping your eyes on a target as you're moving your head. That's all cool information that's coming right from the inner ear. Also, when you're in a car, sort of accelerating forward or going up and down in an elevator, all those little gravity detectors in your ear sending that information from the inner ear on either side through those different nerves up to the brainstem and brain. And so our inner ear does play a really important role in our overall sense of balance. So some of the things that we do at UCSF, we have a balance and fall center where we look for patients who have different dizziness or balance symptoms, who may be experiencing vertigo or that feeling like the room is spinning around in circles or you're spinning around in circles. One of the first steps that we do is often a hearing test to see, you know, is hearing related at all, because it's in the same inner ear structure. And then after that, doing a comprehensive balance assessment. And so in this photo down here on the right is one of the chairs that we have for our balance test. It's one of the few ones in the country called a rotary chair. Gives us some really good diagnostic information about the health of how each of your inner ears is doing, if there's any difference between the two sides. And we really try and get down to all those different loop structures within the inner ear, try and get a sense of where there might be a problem or a breakdown in the signal going on. And in the end, using all that information to try and improve your balance. One of the good things about, one of the amazing things about our brain is that, you know, if there is a difference between either side, over time through vestibular rehabilitation and physical therapy, finding ways for the brain to compensate and try and sort of that prognosis actually being hopeful that over time through that we can try and find a new way to adapt it and help with your balance through physical therapy, in particular vestibular physical therapy. So I want to thank all of you so much for spending the time with us today, and want to open it up to questions. We just want to know that we're always a resource. We put down our emails here on the bottom and have some more information. There's lots of great information on our website, and also some different videos, even about some of the different balance problems, balance pathologies, and balance treatment. But want to open it up to all of you now if there's any comments, questions, anything else we can help you up with. That's some of the main information we wanted to share with you today.
Great. Thank you, Chris and Jenny. Great job sharing. Those